But if you go online, you'll find plenty of little silly nonsense talking about this concept of death spells. And there are many websites on there that you can go to, and you have all these spiritual healers and outlandish claims of buy this book, buy this talisman, buy this or that, and you can get these powers. But the ability to use a notebook to actually cause someone's death is ludicrous. It is not something that is possible. It is not something that is real, unless somebody actually does have control of a jinn or some other form or concept. Now, this is not to say that here in the West, people are taking this lightly. Dateline, South Carolina, February 29th, 2008. A Hartsville Middle School student has been removed from class pending a disciplinary hearing after a school administrator confiscated a notebook titled Death Note earlier this week. The notebook is based on a Japanese cartoon manga called Death Note, which is shown on Cartoon Network. The show is popular among young people, and fans sometimes create their own Death Note books. It's available on Cartoon Network as part of the channel's Adult Swim programming, according to the school district officials. It's also available on DVDs and in a new Nintendo game. The notebook contained a list of 7 students' names. The parents of the student listed in the book have all been notified, according to the district officials. Hartsville Middle School principal Chris Rogers notified all parents through a letter sent home with students Friday. Quote, regardless of the origin of the book, we take the situation very seriously, Rogers said in the letter. The safety of our school family is always our top priority. We treat situations like this the same as if a student called in a bomb threat or brought a weapon to school, he said. While there may not be any serious intent to do harm, we cannot and will not take that chance with our students. We will take all steps necessary to ensure our students' well-being. Rogers advised parents to talk with their children about what he or she watches on television and the internet. Well, there you go, an actual story from the presses out of South Carolina just in the last month, where a student was kicked out and a death note confiscated, an actual fear on behalf of the school district because a student had a death note. Now, supposedly, there's been other cases in other places across the United States where other students have had their death notes confiscated. Why is it that there is such a large fear of the supernatural world, or such apprehension about a novelty trick, a parlor trick? This concept of the Death Note. Again, with the wake of Virginia Tech and Columbine and some of these other things, many school officials are somewhat fearful of any kind of mention of the concept of death, or the concept of some kind of threatening, ominous methodology of terrorism, subtle terrorism, where by the writing of people's names, in the Death Note, they have gotten so scared by what they're seeing. Now, interestingly, to get back to the concept of Death Note, the show, as the show proceeds, we find Light using his power, but he doesn't go for very long before people start to suspect. As criminals start to disappear, people are wondering, who is this person who has the ability to cause these deaths? And a character named L, who is a private investigator, a genius in his own way, just as Yagami Laito is a genius as well, start a battle of the minds. Now, without giving any spoilers, the anime series Death Note, is basically a moral battle between Laito and L, as both of them try to outwit one another in one of the most brilliant displays of outmaneuvering chess played out in a story that you will ever see. Now, being a person, like I said, who didn't grow up expecting to watch cartoons as an adult, I found the idea of getting into anime somewhat troubling at the beginning. But after the first few episodes of watching Death Note, I was mesmerized. The dialogue in the show is so brilliantly done, and the strategy being played out as Light tries to continue on his goal of creating world peace, and L tries to formulate a way of catching him, is just brilliant. But we're seeing this concept of Asian phenomena, the spiritual and the supernatural from Asia, is breaking in a large scale in the West. Now, Death Note is just an example. But similarly, we're seeing many of the horror, spiritual, supernatural films that are been released in the last 10 years to be originally based on shows that have been created in Japan. The Ring 2, Pulse, the new movie with Kristen Bell that came out. A lot of the concepts of dealing with the spiritual and the supernatural, creatures from the underworld, creatures from the unseen world. Now, as I was saying earlier, we know from Islam that there are humans, but in addition to humans, there is the unseen world. In that unseen world, we have both angels and jinns. Now, of the jinns, there are numerous kinds. There are those that are good and righteous, and there are those who are evil and the followers of Satan. And if you remember on the episode of Hot Conflict where we did a review of the show Lost, we talked about the concept of jinns on the island of the Lost, and the idea of the others being able to move through space and time, like jinns, similar to the whispering, the waswasa, of the unseen world that sometimes comes into focus, comes into hearing of the person. And so this phenomenon goes through in the show, and it's played out through the series as Ryuk, the Shinigami, the death god that Light can see. Now, the person who touches the Death Note, as you listen to the clip, is able to see this jinn, or this Shinigami, and no one else is able to see him. And because of this ability, they are able to do things that other people cannot do. They are able to order the Shinigami to do things for them on their behalf. And from those who have understand the world of the jinn, we have very similar concepts of people being able to use jinns for evil purposes. But just as I have always told you, if you use a jinn or something that we might call dark magic or black magic or evil magic, you do so at your own peril. Because magic is one of the kaba'ir. It's one of the major sins. It is assigning part of the divinity of the Lord to a creature who is not worthy of being worshipped. Now, oftentimes people are confused because it is not that they are going to worship a jinn and bow down to them. But if you are to offer sacrifice, or if you are to do rituals of worship, whether they be sacrifice or devotion, or following the orders of a Shinigami, or a death god, or a jinn, you are therefore ceasing to worship the Lord Most High, and you have fallen into the trap of the underworld. You have sold your soul for a pitiful cause, as they say. Now, it is common in the Western world that we say you sold your soul, but you sold your soul to the devil. You made a deal with the devil and you sold your soul. You made a contract with the devil and you sold your soul. Now, this concept is played out in many cultures, in Asian cultures, in Western cultures, and even in strange concepts in the Cajun world, such as the crossroads, where you go to the crossroads and you find the Shinigami or the Jin, and you ask them to do something on your behalf. But then your soul is sold to that evil Jin, and your fate in the afterlife is doomed. This is the concept of the Death Note. But it isn't something that people should be worried about. It is there for your entertainment. It is there for you to enjoy